There are moments when you meet someone who makes you feel like you've finally arrived, like every part of you that once felt inadequate has suddenly found its place. She looks at you, and in that gaze, you think you've been seen for the first time. But slowly, something shifts. What once felt safe begins to feel uncertain. Every word, every silence, every glance starts to carry weight. You find yourself overthinking, trying harder, giving more. You tell yourself it's love, that every relationship takes work, but deep down, a quiet unease starts to grow. You're no longer sure when love became a test you keep failing. This story isn't about villains or victims, it's about patterns, subtle emotional dynamics that play out in relationships every day. Most manipulation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with lies or cruelty. It comes disguised as care, as affection, as someone who simply needs your patience or help. That's what makes it so powerful. It starts with empathy, the very thing that makes you human, and turns it into a chain. The more you care, the deeper you go. The more you try to fix it, the further you drift from yourself. What begins as love slowly becomes survival, and you forget who you were before them. Some people have learned, consciously or not, how to draw others into this pattern. They don't break you overnight. They do it in fragments, one small compromise at a time, until you no longer notice the difference between love and control. But once you see the signs, once you understand the way it works, you gain something powerful: clarity. And with clarity comes the strength to protect your peace. One of the most common ways emotional imbalance begins is through the illusion of generosity. You meet someone who seems impressed by your drive, your achievements, your willingness to provide. At first, it feels good to give. You want to see them happy. You plan dinners, surprises, little gestures that feel natural. But soon, those gestures become expectations. Affection begins to show up only when you're spending your money, your time, your energy. It's no longer about connection, it's about transaction. Love starts to carry a price tag. Each yes you give teaches them how far they can push, how much they can take before you break. You don't realize it right away because giving feels noble. But love that depends on what you offer instead of who you are isn't love, it's emotional commerce. Eventually, you notice the dread that comes with every request, the guilt that follows every refusal. You begin to equate generosity with worth, but here's the truth. Anyone who loves only when you're giving doesn't love you. They love what you give them. True affection is never conditional. It doesn't demand constant proof. It grows in gratitude, not in expectation. And when someone uses kindness to control, you're not their partner, you're their source. The moment you see this pattern, you have a choice. Keep feeding it until you're empty, or step back and protect your peace. Then there's the kind of relationship where trust erodes slowly, hidden under charm. You meet someone who seems honest, even vulnerable. She shares stories, confessions, little moments of openness that make you believe she's genuine. But as time passes, small inconsistencies appear. The details shift, timelines blur, and when you notice, she turns it around. You're too sensitive, you're imagining things, you start doubting yourself instead of her. That's how psychological confusion begins. Not with deception, but with denial. Each small lie chips away at your confidence until you stop trusting your own memory. When truth becomes negotiable, love becomes unstable. You find yourself constantly defending, checking, explaining, apologizing just to keep the peace. But love should bring peace naturally. If you're always justifying your sanity, you're being manipulated. The liar's greatest weapon isn't dishonesty, it's your empathy. Because good people always want to understand, to forgive, to believe that intentions matter more than actions. But the truth is, honesty doesn't need to be defended. When someone values truth, they make it safe to ask for it. If you're constantly confused, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're being bent. And then there's the woman whose magnetism feels impossible to resist, the one who walks into a room and instantly captures attention, not because she's looking for someone, but because she's addicted to being desired. At first, it feels harmless. You admire her confidence, her glow, but soon you realize it's not connection she seeks, it's validation. Every compliment she collects becomes proof that she still matters, still has power. You start to feel uneasy watching her flirt, but you silence that voice, telling yourself you're being possessive. You try to be understanding. You remind yourself that trust means freedom. But deep down, you're not jealous. You're unsettled because you can feel her attention slipping through the cracks. She tells you she's just friendly, that you're overreacting. But you notice how her mood lifts when she's admired and dims when the attention fades. She doesn't crave love, she craves affirmation. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough. You can't compete with the world. You'll never win against the need for constant external validation. What she calls fun, you'll feel as fear. the fear that every interaction might cost you your peace. But here's the truth. Love should never make you question your worth. It should feel grounding, not destabilizing. When affection becomes performance and peace becomes conditional, you're not in a relationship, you're in emotional competition. And some forms of emotional imbalance are even more subtle. There are those who build their sense of worth around what you can provide, not who you are. Their love sounds ambitious. They speak of goals, stability, security. You mistake it for drive, for alignment. But beneath that language is a deep void. To them, affection isn't an exchange of feelings, it's a form of trade. You invest effort and receive temporary comfort. You give affection and they translate it into value. The danger isn't greed, it's emptiness disguised as need. You can pour everything you have into them and still feel invisible. Because for someone who values possessions over presence, no amount will ever be enough. The illusion of love fades in silence, after the gifts are opened, after the trips are done. You begin to sense that nothing you do leaves a trace. Gratitude turns mechanical, smiles feel rehearsed. You realize that what you thought was connection was only convenience. And that's when awareness begins, not in anger, but in exhaustion. You learn that love cannot be bought or bargained for. It thrives not on what's given, but on what's shared. Real intimacy doesn't measure worth, it experiences it. When someone loves you for what you provide, they'll leave when you stop providing. But when someone loves you for who you are, no amount of scarcity can take that away. What all these experiences have in common is this: they take from you quietly in ways that feel justified. You stay because you care, because you hope, because you believe love can heal. But love cannot heal what isn't ready to grow. And sometimes the most powerful form of love is the one you give to yourself, the love that refuses to be drained. When you learn to see these patterns not as failures, but as lessons, everything changes. You begin to recognize the difference between connection and consumption, between affection and control. And from that awareness comes strength, the kind that doesn't harden you, but protects you. Sometimes the imbalance shows up in quieter ways. You meet someone who seems self-sufficient, confident, full of independence. At first, it feels refreshing. You admire her ability to lead her life, to set boundaries, to appear grounded. But over time, that strength begins to feel one-sided. The relationship starts revolving around her comfort, her needs, her plans. When you speak of your needs, they somehow become negotiable or inconvenient. You start adjusting, then compromising, then shrinking. What looks like self-assurance on her part slowly reveals itself as self-absorption. She calls it independence, but it's really entitlement wearing the mask of empowerment. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that maybe you're expecting too much. But the truth is, love cannot survive in an atmosphere where only one person gets to receive. When everything you give goes unnoticed or unreturned, you begin to fade from your own story. That slow disappearance, the one where you apologize for your exhaustion and rationalize her distance, is how people lose themselves in relationships. It's not sudden, it's gradual. You give more to prove you're patient. You stay silent to keep the peace. And each time you do, you teach her that your boundaries are flexible. But love, at its healthiest, thrives in reciprocity. It needs two people both willing to see and support each other. When that balance disappears, so does intimacy. And when the only way to keep the relationship alive is to keep yourself small, that's not love, that's submission. Another pattern hides behind concern that looks like care. You meet someone who seems deeply invested in you. She wants to know where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. At first, it feels like devotion. It feels good to be wanted, but what you don't notice at first is that her curiosity is never satisfied. It grows, expands, multiplies. Every question hides a quiet fear. Every reassurance you give becomes temporary relief. And soon, what began as care turns into control. She says she just wants to feel secure, but what she's really trying to do is manage her anxiety by managing you. Insecurity doesn't disappear when you love it enough. It adapts, it evolves, it finds new ways to confine both of you. You start avoiding certain topics just to prevent an argument. You become careful with your tone, your timing, your words. You change your behavior to calm her storms. But no matter what you do, the peace never lasts. Because the problem isn't you, it's the fear she carries within herself. You can't love someone into feeling safe when they've never learned how to trust safety on their own. And that's the heartbreak of it. You'll pour yourself out trying to prove your innocence, not realizing that you're drowning in her doubts. Eventually, you wake up to a truth that hurts but heals. You cannot be both the partner and the proof. The more you try to fix her fears, the more power they gain. And when love turns into constant defense, it's no longer love, it's captivity. Then there's the person who radiates confidence, almost blindingly so. She shines and everyone feels it. Her presence commands admiration. She's articulate, driven, magnetic. You feel lucky to be chosen by her. But beneath that brilliance lies fragility. Her charm is not connection, it's control. The narcissistic personality doesn't seek love, it seeks reflection. You become a mirror that validates her greatness, a constant source of admiration. When you stop feeding that need, she begins to break you down. It's not because she hates you, it's because without your reflection, she can't see herself. Her praise turns to criticism, her affection to withdrawal, her interest to indifference. You start chasing her approval just to feel the warmth you once had. What you don't see right away is that she's training you to stay loyal through chaos, to stay silent through pain. Every cycle of affection and rejection teaches you to accept less in exchange for a little peace. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, questioning your reality, trying harder to earn what used to be freely given. But love that demands worship isn't love, it's domination disguised as intimacy. The hardest part of leaving someone like this isn't the separation, it's the recovery of your identity. Because by the time you walk away, you've forgotten how to exist outside her world. You've become fluent in her language of guilt and praise. And when she says you've changed, she's right. You've changed into someone who finally remembers who he was before the applause. That is where healing begins, not in revenge or resentment, but in the quiet act of remembering your worth. And sometimes the pattern doesn't come wrapped in cruelty or manipulations. Sometimes it comes dressed in softness. You meet someone who says she isn't ready for love. She's healing, she's confused, she needs time. Her honesty feels admirable, even vulnerable. You believe her. You tell yourself that patience is love, that if you wait, she'll eventually choose you. And so you wait. Days turn to weeks, weeks into months. You keep showing up, hoping consistency will earn commitment. But deep down, she's already made her decision. She enjoys the safety you bring, but she doesn't want to stay. She wants the comfort of connection without the cost of commitment. She says she's figuring herself out, but what she's really doing is keeping her options open while you stand still. This is one of the most painful illusions to break. You tell yourself she's worth waiting for because she's honest. But the truth is, indecision can be its own form of deception. When someone tells you they're not ready, believe them, not as a challenge, but as clarity. You deserve someone whose certainty matches your own. Waiting for someone to choose you is another way of teaching yourself that you're not enough as you are. The person who truly wants you won't hesitate. Love, when it's real, doesn't need convincing. It moves naturally, confidently, without confusion. And when someone's maybe begins to cost you your peace, it's not devotion to stay, it's self-betrayal. Walking away isn't an act of giving up, it's an act of honoring yourself. All these patterns, whether it's manipulation through charm, dependence disguised as need, or affection tied to transaction, have one thing in common. They pull you away from yourself. Bit by bit, they convince you that love means effort without end, that your worth must be earned, that your peace must be sacrificed to prove your devotion. But that's not love. Love doesn't make you question your value, it reminds you of it. It doesn't drain, it restores. The more you begin to understand this, the easier it becomes to recognize when something's wrong, even before it hurts. Awareness becomes your armor. Clarity becomes your calm. You begin to see that the goal isn't to stop loving, it's to love wisely, to see without illusions, to give without losing yourself. The most powerful kind of strength is not in holding on, but in knowing when to release what's quietly breaking you. Healing isn't about hardening your heart, it's about learning to protect your peace. And when you finally choose that, everything changes, not because others become different, but because you do. You begin to value calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, respect over romance. That's when you stop chasing what drains you and start attracting what builds you. Every experience that leaves you feeling diminished instead of supported is an invitation to pause and look closer, not with blame or bitterness, but with awareness. Because emotional imbalance doesn't always come with shouting or cruelty. Sometimes it's quiet. So quiet you only notice it when the silence inside you grows louder than your own thoughts. It starts in the little moments. When you question your instincts, when you suppress your truth to avoid conflict, when you start measuring your peace against someone else's moods. Those small concessions become habits, and habits become identity. You begin to confuse survival with love. But understanding these patterns isn't about vilifying anyone. It's about illumination. Some people behave this way not because they're malicious, but because they're wounded. Their control comes from fear, their need for attention from emptiness, their manipulation from insecurity. Recognizing that truth doesn't mean you have to stay, it means you can leave without hate. Compassion and boundaries can coexist. You can understand someone's pain and still protect your own peace. That's maturity, loving without losing yourself. There's a moment in every unhealthy relationship when something inside you whispers that something isn't right. You don't always act on it right away. You make excuses, you rationalize, you hope. You tell yourself things will get better. But awareness never disappears. It waits patiently until you're ready to listen. When you finally do, you realize that healing isn't about fixing the other person. It's about unlearning what taught you to tolerate what hurt you. That realization is where your power begins to return, because real strength isn't built in endurance, it's built in discernment. Knowing when to stay is courage, but knowing when to walk away, that's wisdom. The first sign of healing is quiet. You stop explaining your worth, you stop chasing validation, you stop rehearsing the past. Instead, you begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself. You start remembering what peace feels like. You start rediscovering simple joys, rest, laughter, time spent without tension. Slowly, you become your own safe place again. You learn that love doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It can be calm, steady, and consistent. It can make you feel lighter instead of smaller. And that's the kind of love worth waiting for, the one that feels like home, not like a test. Part of that healing also involves forgiveness, not for them, but for yourself. Forgiveness for the times you stayed too long, for the ways you silenced your intuition, for the love you gave without limits. You did those things not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. That depth of care isn't your flaw, it's your strength. You just have to learn to aim it where it can grow instead of where it gets drained. Once you do, your empathy becomes power, not vulnerability. It becomes your compass instead of your cage. When you begin to heal, you also start seeing relationships differently. You stop romanticizing chaos. You stop mistaking intensity for connection. You stop confusing anxiety for passion. You learn that calm is not boredom, it's balance. So you understand that love should make you feel grounded, not guessing. And you realize that the healthiest relationships are the ones where peace is present even in disagreement, where communication replaces manipulation, where both people grow instead of one person shrinking. That's what emotional health looks like in love: safety, honesty, and mutual respect. Many men are never taught to recognize emotional manipulation. They're told to be strong, to provide, to endure. But emotional awareness is strength, not softness. Understanding your emotions doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. The ability to recognize when something feels wrong, to speak it, to walk away when needed, that's what protects your heart from cycles of pain. Awareness doesn't build walls, it builds discernment. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop trying to be everything for someone who can't meet you halfway. That's the shift from survival to self-respect. In every ending lies a new beginning, even if it doesn't feel like it at first. The loneliness that follows leaving something unhealthy isn't emptiness, it's detox. It's the absence of chaos. It's your nervous system finally learning to rest. In that space, you start to feel clarity again. You start to think freely, breathe deeply, and make choices not from fear, but from peace. That's how you rebuild trust in yourself. And when you trust yourself, manipulation loses its power over you. Because control only works when doubt is stronger than self-belief. The greatest lesson is this: love should never cost you your sense of self. True connection adds to who you are, it never subtracts. The right partner won't make you prove your worth, compete for attention, or apologize for being human. They'll bring calm, not confusion. You'll know it because you'll feel safe enough to be imperfect. You won't be afraid of silence or honesty. You won't feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells. Real love won't drain you, it will expand you. That's the kind of love that heals, not harms. If you've been through relationships that left you questioning your value, remind yourself, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning so deeply that you'll never have to repeat the same lesson. You begin to see the difference between attraction and alignment, between being needed and being respected. You stop falling for potential and start choosing presence. You learn to listen to how someone makes you feel more than what they say. Because words can charm, but energy never lies. When you feel uneasy, that's your intuition asking you to pay attention. Don't silence it, it's your oldest truth. Healing from emotional manipulation isn't easy. It requires honesty, patience, and sometimes solitude. But on the other side of that work is a version of you that no longer seeks validation through saving others. You become whole on your own. You understand that being enough doesn't come from how much you give, it comes from how deeply you honor yourself. The same heart that once broke under pressure becomes the one that beats with clarity. You begin to love again, but this time differently. You love with awareness, with boundaries, with wisdom, and that's the real transformation, not becoming harder, but becoming clearer. You start seeing through charm, through promises, through patterns. You stop mistaking attention for affection and guilt for love. You know what peace feels like, and you protect it. You know what chaos feels like, and you walk away from it. Awareness becomes your shield, not because you fear love, but because you finally understand what real love should feel like. It's not adrenaline. It's alignment. It's not confusion. It's clarity. It's not control. It's freedom. So if you've ever felt broken by someone who claimed to love you, know this: you're not weak. You're human. You were learning. You were growing. You were being shown where your boundaries needed to be built. Every painful chapter was preparing you for the moment you'd finally see yourself clearly again. And when you do, you realize that your peace was never lost. It was only waiting to be chosen. When you stop chasing what hurts you, you start healing from what broke you. When you stop fighting to be seen by someone who refuses to look, you begin to see yourself. That's where self-respect is born. That's where peace begins. And once you taste peace, chaos will never feel like home again. Love, real love, doesn't demand your exhaustion. It deserves your presence. It doesn't test your worth, it reminds you of it. So stay aware, stay kind, stay open, but never at the expense of your well-being. The moment you learn that letting go is not failure, but freedom, you stop repeating lessons that only teach you pain. Healing isn't about closing your heart. It's about learning to open it wisely. Protect your peace, honor your intuition, and remember, love that costs you yourself is never love worth keeping.